I mean, there was Marion and Donnie, and they were like, Donnie was 6 years older than me, and Marion was 7 years old. I was sort of in the middle of a 8-kid family that had a break in it where Ma didn't have any kids because she lost that one little girl, Eleanor. Then it seemed like when I got a certain age, it's bing, 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 bing. Kids, there was 5 of them under me. And I think that Joyce was the first one she had in the hospital in Oxford. And Linda was the youngest, and everybody was surprised when my mom had Linda because she was big around, she gained weight, and nobody knew she was pregnant. The rest of us were born at home in that little house. Our house was just a little square house with 2 rooms downstairs and 2 rooms upstairs, and built on two bedrooms on the side, one for Mom and Dad, and the kids all slept upstairs. Girls had the little room and the boys had the bigger room. But we had a wood belly pot stove in the living room or in the big room downstairs. The stairway upstairs, the heat would go upstairs. They just leave the door open. And we had a furnace, but it was later when some of the kids got bigger. Ma would make these great big quilts like this, that feather tick, real thick to keep us warm. And she had a pantry, and downstairs between the little kitchen that was in the back, and she had a wood cook stove in there, and she had a big one of these things that you set on top of the stove to heat the water, and a warming oven too down below. But it had, they put linoleum in the bigger room, and they had a big round table in the middle of the room, and then there was chairs on the outside. And then when I was, about 7 or 8, we got a player piano where you pump it on below. Each time we had a picture taken in school or whatever, they had a picture put up there. It was all real old, like you picture an old farmhouse. The far back, as I can remember, is when I lived on the farm. The granary had horses in it, and the old log barn had the cows. We didn't have very many then. But then my dad kept getting more cows, and they would build a barn and put hay in it. And I can remember them all coming and pulling the ropes, raising the barn, And when we had our barn built, we had a big door in the top. When we did a haying, we did it on a wagon and put rope slings on it, and you'd hook them on the end and on the front, and then the tractor, I think horses pulled it first, the rope from the side of the barn to pull it up into the thing, and remembering as a kid going up the chute, and then they'd have a big platform in the back of the barn, and you threw hay off of that, and it jumped down in the hay, and it bounced way up, Between the big new barn and the house, we had these covers, and then you put the corn and extra stuff that you wanted to feed the cows and that in there. And we used to play in that when I was like 4 or 5 years old, pretend it was a house. When I wasn't quite old enough for school, I went to stay with Ned and Charlie Gonsolin in Laval, my mom's aunt. She didn't have any kids or anything, and I remember her having this little shaggy dog. And Charlie would, work out in the field, and she used to pack a lunch in that syrup pail, and the dog would take it out to Charlie. The first time I ever saw a movie was at Charlie and Amanda's house. Took me to a movie, and it was a jungle picture, and I was scared. And that's the first thing I remember. It was just a regular little farm, and my dad had us do everything. Marion and Donnie, Dad put them to work early because he had a hired man until they were big enough to help. Mary and Donnie both learned how to drive young, and I didn't because nobody let me drive the tractor. And then when I did get to drive, I had a wreck. We had several kind of tractors. We had Farmall. I think we had a John Deere once. We had Ford. And we'd have to get up and milk the cows. And I was like 5 or 6 when I started doing that. And then he got a milking machine, and we did that. And then we stripped the cows, and we had a milk house by the milk, a window by the pantry that looked outside, and the separator was right there, and we separated the milk from the cream, and put it in the cold, by the windmill, because that would be running all the time, and the water would be cold. Raised hay and corn and grain, and Dad would always have it in the granary, oats and rye and stuff, and take it to the mill and get it fed. And the corn, he used to plant corn, and then he'd make silage in these big silages. We had a big silage, and we'd go up there. We had to climb to the top when it was full and throw it down and go in the new barn, and each cow, when they came in, they had a pile of silage, and then they had part of the grain, like it was almost like an ice cream and a cake, And then they got a nurse spreader and all that stuff for when they shuck the grain, you cut the grain, you cut it down, and you shocked it. It got tied in shocks and stood up on an air so they dry out, and then they'd come along with the Templins, actually. My grandpa and my uncles ran the thrashing rig, and they'd go to different farms, and they'd thrash the straw from the seeds, and take the grain into the barn, and it was a big thing. My mother would make a big meal, and there'd be about 12 or 13 guys that helped my dad thrash, and they'd get it done in a day. The second farm would just had stock on it and raised hay and stuff like that, and put the animals down there, especially the young Herefords when they had calves and that, and we took them down Highway B to the other farm, and just drove them, walked all the way. It was kind of that farm down there was all built by them when they came from Norway. And we had Dad's uncle, Pete, when he couldn't do very much anymore on the other farm. He lived there alone when everybody died, and he was left to him, and when he died, then my dad got it, and he was 12 miles away from each farm, and there was that old house there, and they had old sewing machines and old marble tables, and Dad rented it for a while, and the people that rented it wrecked some of the stuff, They had all kinds of buildings on there. They had a granary, a big granary. You put all the grain in when you thrashed it. And they had sleighs and horses and a great big old steam engine and with great big wheels. I remember that sitting out there in the back, and Dad did haying down there, and he did corn down there. And Donnie, he stayed down at the other farm a lot to feed the horses and stuff. We had cows, and we left them there all summer, and that's how Donnie got hurt. Grandma and Grandpa had their trailer on that field. He was mowing that field when he was staying down there, and he swatted a horsefly, and the horses jumped and ran until they come to the fence, and they stopped, and the guard that was, that held the stuff to cut the hay, the sharp, got stuck in his arm and dragged him to a Highway G. Donnie was working all night in the fields with tractors, though. Donnie worked hard all his life. He helped Grandpa, in the farm. And Marion did too. She was out on the cultivator. And it was a lot of work. Mom didn't buy much at the store because it's too expensive, she would get puffed wheat and stuff like that for something different for breakfast. But we always had oatmeal and cream wheat and cornmeal. She'd always have something warm. She ate everything at home that they had. Bread and butter they made, and every week she made a great big batch of bread, white bread, and there'd probably be 8, 9, 10 loaves of bread. And that was always on Friday, and we always got to have some warm bread when we come home from school. And Mom made her own butter. She churned her butter in a churn, a round churn. The milk from the cows, and made her cottage cheese too. If we had company, we didn't have to prepare ahead of time a long time with a definite big meal, because we had potatoes and we had the beef, and we just opened a can of beef and cooked all their meat. Had beef and pork, and she decided to kill a bunch of chickens, so that she could can some chickens and have her meal, and cut the heads off, and the dumb old chickens are hopping around. And everybody went deer hunting. We always had deer meat, and we canned it, until she got a freezer, and then we had freezer. Vegetables, I don't know how she did vegetables. I guess a lot of vegetables were put in the basement and canned, beans and stuff like that. Mom made us go down and pick berries in the woods, and she canned them. We had walnuts, and we had orchard. They had apple orchard there, and everything she could get her hands on, she canned. Canned an awful lot of food. Our youth was pretty busy, although, like I told you about the big barn they built, we'd jump in the hay, and we'd play ball at night, and go to the movies at the small towns, the free movies, because people would go Friday night to shop, We belonged to 4-H, where we had a project, and we had to take it to the fair, and they always had a dog. They always had puppies, collies, and then we had a regular cow dog, a yellow one. I don't know what kind it was, but she'd get the cows all rounded up. She'd go around on their heels and get them going a heck of a fast, and then to get them off to the barn. It was a lot of work. It was a hard life for them, but they made it. Kids all grew up. And it cost money to run the farm. Mom sent me to school when I was 5. I know, then you were in grade school, and you went to, I was in Little Lake School, which is a place you could walk to school, but it used to be awful cold. And my dad would take a sled. He had most of the stuff on sleds, and the horses would pull the sleds. And then right across from Little Lake School was a farm owned by Bagleys, and they'd have us come over and wait for our parents to pick us up. It was just a one-room school and one teacher, and maybe probably 25 desks in the school. And you had 8 grades, and the teacher had different schedules on. The class was coming up and sitting on this bench in the front, But you had reading and writing, arithmetic, and social studies, and the same geography and stuff like that. She had to mark all the papers for all the different grades. And you had recess, and you had, the same things that you have today. But see, that was in the country, and you didn't have that many kids, That's why these little schools that you saw dotted all over had to congregate together, because the schools were there wasn't enough kids in the area, so they had to have us go more distance. And so my dad built a cab, kind of like kind of wallboards, that you put in houses, and had windows in it. And we had little Queen, who was our little riding horse. And when we went to another school called Ellen's School, we had to go through the neighbor's long driveway and through the woods with this buggy, and there'd be Charles and me and Donnie and Marion. And that was fun, to ride to school that way. And then right beside the school again was a farm where we could keep the horse during the day. It was time to go home. The last few grade school years were spent at Davis Corners because that was a bigger school. And then I went to Oxford High School. I never was scared going to a big school, and it wasn't a very big school, really. When I started as a freshman, I think there was only 28 or something, and there was quite a couple of the girls that quit to get married, and we ended up with only about 16, 15, something like that. Pat and Joy and Tom Kick, and so that's the way it went up to high school, and then in high school, then you had different classes. You had typing and everything. Yeah, and they took turns taking us to school in a car. I think the neighbors did. Oh, I worked at the Dells one summer at the laundry. The Nimitzes, they bought the laundry in the Dells, and at that time there was just a lot of small motels and stuff, and they Joy Walters and I lived with her and a couple other girls, and we rented a place in the summer just to earn a little money for our senior year in high school, and I worked all summer, and I saved $300, and I still don't know what I did with that money. I think my mom and dad borrowed it from me. She paid it back because class rings and different things for senior year in high school. As growing up went, the years seemed to go by so fast. In high school, it was only 4 years, and it goes by fast. I was the first one to graduate from high school. And then when I got out of high school, I didn't like farm work. I didn't want to stay on the farm. And Marion had been in Madison, and she worked at Oscar Myers.
Jerry Clay's? Yeah, he worked at the welding shop, Harride welding shop, when I worked there. Russ Harride, yeah. It was just a small welding shop. There was about, six guys working there, I guess. 6 or 7. I'm around 54. I think I went to work there in January 51. Must have been 52, right out of high school. Jerry's wife worked at Grant's 5 and Dime uptown at that time on Pinckney Street. So she was a friend with Pauline Clace. Apparently knew Jerry Clace too, so Jerry lined me up with her. The blind date, yeah. I think first day we went on a movie. Went to a movie, and then afterwards, I think we went to the Shuffle Inn to have a beer. I guess second or third date, I brought her home to my house, our house, Hillcrest. And then one of the next weekends, I don't know, first, second, third, I went for a ride up to where her mother and dad's farm was. I stopped at the farm.
Dad always called it the sticks when he came up to see me on the weekends. I would go up on the weekends, and he'd come up anyway.